Alright guys, I am back from what felt kind of like outer space, in which it was Great Britain. Turn and I were flown out there to do the Ever-Chosen Invitational version 2, the summer Ever-Chosen Invitational, so I hope you guys got a chance to see that over the weekend. It was a lot of fun, and man, I'm like just now recovering. I like slept from the 11.5-hour plane flight, and then I slept again, so I'm like coming out of my coma just recently. But what I want to talk about today is the new AMA that was on Reddit, some of the stuff that we kind of missed in the week past while I was gone, and kind of just get overall some of the new things that are coming from Creative Assembly. Now, one of the biggest things that is not on the AMA that they did announce during the summer Ever-Chosen Invitational is the new Spectator mode. Now, the way that this is going to work is that basically someone can create a game as a spectator. So this gives people that are running tournaments, or such as like when Turn or myself do any kind of community casts when we do streams, this gives you a lot of power, right? So you can finally create a game as a spectator, as an admin, basically having the ability to open and close slots, change the map settings, everything like that, without having to create a game, wait till everyone joins, exit the game, tell them quickly rejoin as a spectator, have them close that slot, hoping no one joins, and then have them hopefully know that they're the mod enough to start a game. So it helps get rid of a lot of just what was otherwise BS when it comes to dealing with moving in between any kind of tournament or competitive type of multiplayer game. So that's really exciting. We don't, unfortunately, of course, know a date for that because they didn't announce one, but hopefully it'll come out before the next content update. I think that they were kind of saying that is going to be its own release, if I'm not mistaken. That'll kind of play into some of the things we'll talk about here as well. So let's go into one of the first questions I want to talk about. And what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to flash up the question that we were talking about as well as their answer. And we'll kind of go over briefly what the question and answers were without maybe reading them verbatim for every single one. So the first question it's a very minor question. We'll start off kind of slow, get a good pace going, get you guys kind of warmed up, huh? Get a nice little massage going. So the first question is kind of simple here. Warhammer 2, when it was announced, was basically said, hey, we're going to have Mac and Linux ports for the game. And Grace confirmed, yeah, sure, we are going to do that. And here is also a Twitter post that says, hey, we are in fact definitely going to be adding a Mac OS and Linux port for Total War Warhammer 2. So for those of you guys on a not superior operating system like a Mac or a superior operating system like a Linux, you can now have full access to Total War Warhammer 2 whenever that comes out in early autumn, is I believe the official release date. So moving on to, this is a little bit bigger of a question and answer one, so this one is our second one. It has got a lot of questions here, and you guys can take a look at these individually if you want. But some of the big ones that are on here are, hey, what's the estimated release date for the next campaign pack? And Grace said that they've internally decided when that is, but they've not publicly announced it. Now, the important thing here is people kind of keep clamoring about the fact that we won't see Skaven and Lizardman updates until 2019. Very true. That Lord pack is coming in 2019. But as you guys remember from the dev update, they did say the campaign pack is coming before that. So if it's coming in early 2019, that kind of leaves that campaign pack for, late mid well, now we're past the midpoint, but the next 3-4 months of 2018. So we do have content coming, which is, a godsend in and of itself, but it is not obviously going to be the Lizardman and Skaven DLC that a lot of people want to see. So be mindful of that when you guys kind of look at the upcoming content. Don't realize it's not going to be a dry spell all the way until 2019. The second one here is, bug fixes and patches. Will they be tied to content? Now that's in this question, and we answer it better in another one down the line. So we'll table that one because I just wanted to at least acknowledge that we are going to hit that down the road here. Will new content be available as a prize for Make War Not Leave Not Lore event? That is not something I don't know about because it's in February. What was the big one on here I wanted to take a look at? Oh, will there be a spectator mode for multiplayer matches? And as we've answered that, and as I've talked about that at the very beginning, yes, we will get that. So a lot of good things that we're going to be seeing coming in the future. And the cool thing about this AMA is that it really kind of fleshes out some of the big questions the community has about how Creative Assembly approaches things. And we can talk about that a little bit more as we move down the line here. Where is the Blood DLC for Throne of Blood, Thrones of Britannia? Late August is the projected release date for that. So those of you guys that are playing Thrones and you want to get that blood going, late August is your release date for that. Our next question here is basically is a bit of a larger one, and this is kind of like spanning some different things. So you can see here, hey, you know, how does the development team approach any of the mods that are super popular that kind of tweak the game a little bit? And Rich from CA was basically saying, like, we notice it, and we sometimes you guys are pretty much on board with what we're saying, and we like that. So, you know, with the Dwarven Runic Forge that came out, that was pretty much a carbon copy. Well, not necessarily a carbon copy, but it was very similar to the mod that came out right after the Tomb King's launch. So the dev team does really kind of get a chance to see a lot of this stuff, and they can say, hey, you know, this is freakishly close to what we're already working with. So it doesn't say that they probably look at all of it and go, oh, okay, let's just throw that on the drawing board. But, you know, I think some of these things, like the tiered tax system, maybe that's already on their mind. I don't know. Because it kind of seems like it's already, it's just an implication, right? Because it's already in previous Total War games. This is one of the very first games where you pretty much have the ability to tax no or tax yes, versus like high, very high, a little bit, very low. So this is the very first time that we kind of have a, well, maybe not the very first time, but it kind of has a really reduced feel to the tax system. So hopefully they kind of looked at that and say, okay, well, maybe we should just kind of introduce this to Total War Warhammer 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. Have you considered cross-game DLC for Game 2? Now, they said that they've considered it in the answer, which is cool and not cool, because it's saying like, yeah, sure, we think that's awesome, but does that say, yeah, sure, we're going to do it? So I'm not really sure how to really take that answer, because, you know, they bring up the Salaka here brings a really good point. You know, the Grom and the Paunch. I'm sorry, the Grim and the Paunch, which would be Grom the Paunch and Eltharion from the High Elves. And I would love to see that as a DLC pack. So I'd love to get like a definitive answer if we'll see kind of cross-game DLC, but I think we might see that towards the end of Total War Warhammer 2's like development cycle, I guess you could say, before they jump into 3. And they're kind of like, okay, well, we've added all the races we wanted to. We're saving whatever we need for 3. Let's dive in on cross 1 and 2 content. I think that's when we'll kind of maybe see that if we actually ever do. The third question here is, are there any plans to update the army skills for the Old World Lords? And they basically go into saying, yeah, we are definitely aware of the disparity between Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 Lords. So hopefully we'll get a continuous refining of those lords. This will play heavy into something we're about to, I think it's the next question that we'll bring up on their refining of Warhammer 1 content. But hopefully they'll continue to tweak these guys, because these updates as they come out and how they do the content updates alongside them really helps to push Warhammer 1 up to that same level of excellence that Warhammer 2 is. And it's not to say that Warhammer 1 wasn't a great game, but Warhammer 1 had no benchmark to compare itself against. So anything you do in Warhammer 1 is amazing. But Warhammer 2 has 1 as its benchmark, and they say, you know, we have to beat that. So you have 2 that comes out, and everything in 2 feels so much more polished, feels so much more robust, because now they've got, 2-3 years under their belt with the Total War Warhammer franchise. It's easy for them to kind of approach these things and say, hey, here's what we didn't do right in the beginning. Here's what we didn't do right with this lord. We've learned how to make support lords, melee lords, hybrid lords better now. How do we do that better here? And it's one thing to make new lords better, but it's another thing to have old lords, legacy lords, which are a huge amount, a contingency of the lords existing, to still be kind of subpar by comparison. So I think it's going to take them getting everything out that they want to get out before they can really go back and refine everything. Because if you don't do it like that, think of it this way. If you improve one process and you just keep improving that one process, and you keep improving it, and you keep improving it, and you can't just go back and improve the old ones until you've really gotten to a point where you're saying, okay, I'm no longer going to improve this process and I'm no longer going to do Total War Warhammer 2 content. I will now go back and refix or retweak all the other things I have included. So if you're kind of constantly fine-tuning, you're wasting time. If you spend all this time going, okay, we're going to build 2 content, but work on 1 content, build 2 content, but work on 1 content, you just really kind of hamstring your development cycle, right? So by basically building 2, tweaking 1, building 2, slightly tweaking 1, like you kind of leapfrog over it and hopefully get to a point where by the time 2 is done, everything will kind of match up. So we'll see how that really kind of plays out. That's mainly my conjecture, right? I'm just kind of saying, like, I understand the mindset But hopefully at the end of the day, it all kind of comes to fruition, and we see a Total War Warhammer 2 that is really a blanket of both games before 3 comes out that makes just a lot of amazing sense. Let's jump on over here to the next question. When vanilla factions in Total War Warhammer 1 getting reworked besides the Dwarf in Mortal Empires? So Grace was saying here the next campaign pack will come with another rework to an old faction. And this has been confirmed many times with the AMA, so that's super exciting. I think there's one point where Rich even says by Sigmar, kind of hinting that it might be Empire. So we have kind of Empire as maybe the next faction to get that old world rework that we got with some of the other ones, or with Dwarfs getting their troll, or I'm sorry, not troll hunters, giant slayers. Troll Hunters are a really great show on Netflix, I'll tell you that. But there's a lot of great stuff hopefully coming in the future here. Let's jump to our next one. What mechanics you aim to improve in the future DLC? Now, this was pretty huge, right? So Mitch from CA is pretty much telling us that the two that he really wants to change the most are Chaos Invasion and Wood Elves Amber. And that is it's like hearing those things is like a godsend, because I mean the Wood Elf Amber system is such a pain in the ass. It's really cool because it's okay, how do we make this a unique portion of the faction? But it doesn't end up becoming unique. It just becomes this giant hamstring for like the momentum of play. And he even says, we wanted outposts to be these expendable things that you kind of create and then abandon. But then when they give you Amber, if you abandon them and you lose them, you lose that Amber. So they'd stop becoming the expendable resource they had kind of wanted. So it looks like the Amber system really got away from the original concept that CA had for the Wood Elf Amber system. So that's exciting to hear, right? And then Chaos Invasions, I mean, he even outright says, I could probably write 500 pages on how it should be and the problems with it. So they definitely have a really good idea. The Chaos Invasion is really kind of a huge sticking point in the game, and it really does kind of throw things awry. So hopefully with the rework of the Chaos Invasion system and the Wood Elf Amber system, whenever they do that, both the mid to late game will feel more polished, and the Wood Elves themselves will actually be enjoyable outside of their mini campaign for just doing unlocks. Because we don't know when any of this will happen, of course. These are things they want to work on, and they don't have a projected date for these reworks, but getting them would be huge, right? Because there's a lot of things about Total War Warhammer 2 that are so much better than 1, and they're not huge, but the invasion system and the Wood Elf Amber system are just like two gigantic thorns in your side whenever you think about Total War Warhammer 1. It almost makes playing Wood Elves completely unplayable. So we hopefully get those reworks kind of soon. Move over to our next one now. This one's actually kind of nifty here. And I want to kind of go in a little bit more into this one because it means a lot to me after kind of going to CA's office and getting, I guess, a picture of how their development, when they go on their development blog, they talk about what the new team's doing, what this team's doing, what that team's doing, what this team's doing. And seeing it in person, you kind of get like a really good appreciation, or at least a good sense of what that actually means. Like the team. What the hell? That's like a nebulous word. What does that mean? Well, in this question here, I'm worried that new content plans have been reduced now with this new direction, plus the distraction on Three Kingdoms. I want to just hit that right on the head. There's no such thing as a distraction on Three Kingdoms. They have a whole different development team for that. So, as they've stated in all their development blogs. So, to kind of say like what I think is honestly like a pretty insulting and pompous comment, like distraction on Three Kingdoms. Well, it is a gaming company. They do have to work towards their bottom line. It's not a distraction. It's the next thing they've got to do. So they've got a Total War Warhammer 2 new content team. They've got the Total War Warhammer 3 team, or whatever their fantasy team is, and they've got their Three Kingdoms teams. So it's like if they've got all these teams, it's not none of them distract from one another because they're all within their own silos, right? Their own microcosms. So I think that's kind of a rude kind of statement right there, the distraction, and that's kind of been the sentiment across the community, like, oh, this is distracting from this content. It's like, well, no. They've got a development team for that content. They don't have to worry about that. So it just all kind of comes down to what each team's doing, what their development cycle is, or what their development timeline is. So it's kind of a weird thing here, right? So rest assured, we are not far from finishing the trilogy. In fact, Warhammer 2 has plenty of cool things on the way. And by the time we are finished by post Warhammer 3, this will be one monster of a game. So hopefully with whatever races we get towards the end of 2 or as we go through 2, and whatever races we get in 3, we are going to have this behemoth. I mean, they said in Total War Warhammer 1 that they want to do every single race that has had a rule book. So I don't know if that meant like every single 8th edition race or every single 8th edition race, including every single race that's had a rule book. Like the Chaos Dwarfs, they had one once upon a time. So there's a lot to be kind of garnered from the scope of that project, and it's a pretty big behemoth because no one's ever done that properly. Like, right, the Total War Warhammer franchise as a whole is probably the only time Warhammer Fantasy's had a really good RTS. Well, it's probably the only good RTS for Warhammer Fantasy. Like, man, what's it called? Shadow of the Horned Rat is not the best game, and goddamn is it so hard. Mark of Chaos is a kick in the dick. So this is the first time we've actually able to see this come to life. So it's kind of got an insane scope behind it. Whoops. Moving on to our next question here. This one's a really kind of a brief one, but a really good one, right? Are Footlord characters like Grimgor getting buffed? And Rich just simply responds, Grimgor will be looked at to make him the boss. But hopefully we get stuff like many of the on-foot characters a lot better. I mean, Grimgor is such this behemoth in the lore. Like, I mean, he straight up cheap shot kicks Archaon on the dick in Storm of Chaos. So hopefully we'll be able to see Grimgor actually come to the field and be not just a meme lord and just this lord that you can choose, oh, I'm just going to grief you, or oh, I'm new to the game and don't understand that Grimgor is absolute trash. So hopefully we'll kind of see him get fleshed out a little bit better, or just any lord that's relegated to foot. In fact, like, anytime you have to choose a lord on foot, it always seems like you're gimping yourself. Like if you take Heinrich Himmler, but before they actually Kemmler, not Kemmler, good God. Before they actually changed his mask, he was just getting beat around nonstop, right? He couldn't even cast Krell. They finally kind of tweaked him a little bit so you can get Krell off immediately and it's a little bit better. But Footlords just tend to get mobbed so quickly by everything else in the game that it's such a hindrance. It used to be a little, I mean, it's different in tabletop, but the tabletop kind of mechanic of a Footlord versus an on-horse lord is so much different because you have lords that are joining units and you can't just solo them out behind the army or something like that, or goon them with a bunch of flyers. So I think that the Footlord has to have a lot of overhauls being done with it. Let's scoot on over to our next. Warhammer 1 got a campaign starting screen overhaul. Any chance we'll get one for Warhammer 2? And Mitch basically said, like, yeah, we realize that it's a huge hindrance to make a Mortal Empires campaign and see like 15 million lords in a line. And you really have no idea where they start. So it says here they will be getting a tweak for that, but they don't know when. So they want to do it, but they don't know when that's going to happen. So hopefully that'll come sooner rather than later, especially as we expand lords in the beginning of 2019 and whatever the campaign pack adds in 2018. So if they add 4 from the campaign pack, like they said they're going to do, every campaign pack's going to have 4 lords. And if we get 2 lords from the lord pack, that's 6 more lords to that horizontal list. So it's going to be a real pain to navigate the Mortal Empires thing. So hopefully that'll come sooner rather than later. Next one here. Do you understand the problem the community have? And I wanted this to kind of be one of the last ones here. The community have with tying major bug fixes to new content. Do you think it's a good idea to have major bugs staying in game for several months because of this policy? Now, Rich fills in everything and he explains, pretty expertly how they kind of approach the process of making fixes. And they basically say, like, yeah, we can change it on the fly, but that then changes the code that people are working on with DLC. And rather than hindering the content that's coming out to you guys, we'd rather just make the content and the patches bundled together. While that is super annoying from a player standpoint, like, I mean, it's frustrating, right? I mean, the content for Total War Warhammer 2 has had a really good space in between it. And that's use the word good and not in a good fashion here, right? It's had a long distance in between each content update. And with that, you've had major bug fixes that have gone for 4 or 5 months, unattended. So that's a huge headache. But at least this answer puts at least a good explanation on it, and they aren't just kind of doing it for some sort of weird, obscure reason. This has a pretty good basing in the sense that last time we saw them kind of fuck with code, we had a 1.5 year delay or whatever it was on Norska. So if they want to do whatever they can to keep code on the same basis so that it doesn't cause them to work over themselves and possibly skew content release, I'm all for it. Because last time we did that, like I said, guys, we had a Norska delay from September all the way until May. So that's not a fun time. So I'd rather they did the kind of slow, painstaking major bug fixes versus the rolling out bug fixes. Our content delay is now delayed, and there's a chance that a content pack might completely break every single bug. So that's a bug fix. So that's another thing to consider. So, man, that's a headache. But honestly, that kind of ties everything up here. Those are the kind of like the big 10 questions I wanted to go into. There were so many more, and I'll link the AMA below, so you guys can dive in on some of the maybe some of these actual questions and answers that you want to read a little bit better, or jump into the comment section on, so where you can kind of get a good feel for it. But I wanted to sum up 10 of the more cool questions from the AMA that I really pulled a lot out of. Thank you so much for joining us here today on these 10 AMA questions. My brain is still kind of cooked from the flight, if this video didn't make that evident enough. But thanks as always for watching here today, guys. Have a good one. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, look at Patreon, follow me on Twitter, send me your favorite crumb cake recipes. Sometimes you should always wash your colors in cold water, or else they'll shrink. Wait, I'm totally off base. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one. Take care.